You say you're fine, but I can see right through. You're holding your secrets for way too long. This can't keep going on. With every lie, they keep on hurting you, getting away with everything they do. This can't keep going on. No, we're gonna find them, and I'm gonna fight for you. They better start hiding. We'll be running with the lions, lions. We'll be running with the lions, lions. They can't run, they can't hide. We won't stop until they're down. We'll be running with the lions, lions.
Hello, everyone, and happy Sunday. I'm your host, Dr. Kalpana Sundar, and welcome to another episode of Gloves Off. First of all, I cannot believe that it is the last Sunday in September. So October is next week, which I'm super excited about because it's like my birthday month. And like a small child, I still love to celebrate my birthday for like a whole month. And then I have this other silly tradition that I like to flip the numbers and say that I'm that age instead of the age that I am. Except this year I can't do that because it's the same darn number. So I guess I just got to really fess up about my age. But in any case, I hope you guys are having a great weekend so far. I was actually in Florida for about a week and had a little fun time with this tropical storm that hit the west coast of Florida. It wasn't too bad. Luckily, everything was fine. I was there visiting my father and we were all good. But I was worried about, any issues with airports and getting back. But thankfully, everything worked out perfectly. So my prayers are going out for anybody who was affected by that storm because it was a nasty one. I mean, some of us get lucky, and I just am always worried about those storms. I almost forgot how devastating they could be because I've lived in California now for almost a year, and obviously we don't have hurricanes here, so I almost forgot till I had to be in it again. So my heart goes out to anybody who was affected terribly through that storm. So today I have an exciting guest. His name is Joe McKinley, and we are going to be diving into all kinds of conversations. We're going to be talking about risk and how you can take strategic risk. And that's really what the show is about. Gloves Off is really about people who are courageous. They show up authentically. They live life on their terms. And a lot of that is about taking some risks in life. We tend to want to play things safe because it's comfortable, but it's when we get outside of our comfort zone where the real magic happens. So before we get Joe on here today, obviously I'm going to thank our sponsors, Elevated CPA, for sponsoring the show every week. And then we'll be back after the small commercial. All right, welcome back. So I don't know if any of you have had this experience. I mean, often when we are younger in our life, I feel like we plan out this path and it's usually a very, very straight line. You just are like, okay, I'm going to do this, and this. Because at that point in our lives, we don't anticipate all the little turns and curves that life can take because we think it's going to go exactly like we planned. Then, of course, as we get older, we realize nothing ever really goes as planned. And often that straight route that we projected has a lot of twists and turns and is often very circuitous. And later, though, when we look back on it, I think we often find that each one of those little detours, so to speak, have really taught us something important. So I say this because Joe's life was quite like this. And so I wanted to give it some context. So without further ado, let's bring Joe on. Well, hello, Joe. Welcome to Gloves Off. So good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, of course, of course. I've been excited about this. I mean, I've gotten to know you over the past couple of years, and I really just love, I love our conversations. I love your philosophy on life, and you've really just, you've really sort of taken life by the horns, and I feel like you've created what you want, and I feel that's kind of unusual for somebody, you know, younger people don't tend to do that so quickly, and so I was kind of curious as to like why or how did you know to just do that? I mean, how did you know that you're just going to do things that were a little unconventional to get where you wanted to be and, so to speak, take that those strategic risks in your life?
Yeah, good question. I don't know that it was always planned. I think I've kind of always known what I wanted, and as you grow up, what you want changes, and so
Mhm.
the path to get there changes. Growing up, I was not exactly the best student or studious per se. I did well in school, but it wasn't something where I was giving it my all. I was big in sports and I was giving that my all. And I feel like as I kept getting older, I kept just trying to find the things that I like to do. And at some point, when I was ready to maybe actually become an adult and start a family and start looking at my life as a whole instead of just, hey, how do I get access to things I want to do, whether it's, living in a certain place or partying or whatever it is. It kind of makes you think about, who you need to be or what things do you need to do, what habits do you need to have um, to get where you want to go. And so now I have a destination, which has been different than before. Before it's kind of just been, what do I like to do? Well, let's do more of that. And now I do things that I don't necessarily like to do all the time, but I'm doing it because I know it's going to get me where I need to go. And that's a little bit of just, I think, growing up. I think everybody probably has that at some point, and some people find it early. I mean, looking at you and becoming a doctor and the things you had to do, you had a destination probably pretty early, um, which can be a blessing and a curse because maybe it wasn't the destiny. When you pick a destination before you have a lot of experience or life knowledge, it can almost be like, okay, well, I made it down this path, but wait, did I really want to be here?
Exactly. Well, I think it's interesting what you were saying because like you mentioned, you have this destination and originally you just wanted to do things that just brought you joy or things that you enjoyed or whatever, it was all about following that bliss, so to speak.
Yep.
But I think it's interesting because, as you were talking about that, I realized that, for me early in my life, I definitely was very destination focused. It's funny because I have the destination still because you're right, the destinations do change, and I've changed my destination a couple of times. But what's interesting now is I actually have my destination, but I follow my bliss there.
Yeah.
So, I think I've just changed the way I do it because before I used to just get so, it just was like a very straight line and it was like very unfun getting there. And I think what I'm realizing now is I can actually have fun while I get there. And if I get there a month or two later, it's really okay. Didn't
Yeah.
used to feel that way when I was younger, though. I was very militant about, getting things done at certain times, even when it didn't even matter.
Yeah. No, definitely. Um, I'm really happy that you're in that spot, and I feel like I am as well. It's kind of finding the bliss, or when I say I said being able to do things you don't necessarily want to do, but like doing them with a smile because you're happy with the path and happy with the destination and fulfilled versus really just carrying a burden to get there. And a lot of that is mindset. A lot of that is um, kind of acceptance and just growing. But I think that's a lot of people that I talk to, a lot of people that I meet, and and because of what I do, I get all sorts of people that I talk to. I get to hear about everybody's life journeys and decisions, and it's something that a lot of people don't figure out, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, and it kind of rolls back into the subject we want to talk about a little bit, but taking risk
Mm.
because it's hard to find that path and that fulfillment where the destination and the bliss can coincide without taking risk.
Very true. So, I want to just talk about risk for a bit, just because I feel that our society has it ingrained in us to stay in the comfort zone. I feel
Mhm.
that that is the dogma that's prescribed. And a lot of people really subscribe to that. They really do. I would say that most people subscribe to that because fear is innately responsible for keeping us safe. So then, if they try to get out of their comfort zone, that fear kicks in. Then they're like, oh my God, that was just traumatic. So I'm just going to stay here because I know what this sucks. Because usually they're saying it and it really, really sucks. But they're
Right.
like, this sucks. But you know what? At least I have a job. At least I have a roof over my head. At least I have this. And then they go down the list of all the things. I have health insurance. I have this, And I mean, every time I hear that, I'm like, oh God, And I get it. I'm not saying that people should jeopardize their well being and take, uncalculated, non-strategic risks,
Right.
but there is a way to take risks that you are being strategic. For example, when you have certain skill sets and you can actually take those and do something better for your life rather than working maybe a job that's mistreating you or has a toxic environment or a toxic corporate culture, or you're working, maybe 100 hours a week or whatever those situations are, because I hear them all the time. There is a point where you may just think, wait, I have some skill sets that are valuable. How do I repurpose them and make my life better utilizing these skills? So anyway, so I wanted to hear, that was just a little preface, but I want to hear about how strategic risks that you took in your life, I don't know when the first one was, but how they affected or how they got you to where you are right now.
Yeah. Well, America's this amazing place, but has some huge flaws. Um, One of the flaws is we have this expansive system that's set up for you to fall into what you were just describing as this. You're in school, you get good grades, you move on to the next thing, you take out loans, you get your first job, and everything that most Americans who go through that system, um, you kind of have that weight or that box around you, and so that's one thing where I don't necessarily think it's a great thing, but America's amazing because it's one of the few places where you don't have to stay in that box. You have every opportunity to exit that box and go, follow your heart's content. And our system is set up to reward that risk. So just my own preface on how I think about that especially when it comes to careers. But for me, I was always playing sports, academics and jobs, and none of that stuff mattered. Sports allowed me to get into college and have exposure and access, traveling the country, traveling internationally, um, and I was, studious enough to get a finance degree in college. But when I got out, I was still in that box, and I started sending applications, and my first job was working as an analyst for Winn-Dixie's corporate office. So Winn-Dixie, the big corporate grocery chain. They have a corporate office in Jacksonville. They brought me in and basically was spending 40 hours a week creating Excel spreadsheets and financial analysis for a very large company. And was getting paid okay, but was sitting in a little cubicle, and I was 22, um, and I realized really quickly that this was going to be a long life if I was in this cubicle for 40 years and moving up. And you kind of look upstream and you're like, okay, who's my direct boss? Who's their boss? Who's their boss? And like, what are they doing? And so the first risk I took was just leaving that job. Um, I took the money I was making and I started traveling to places where I had a center of influences, people that I knew, that were professionals, family, friends, whatever it is, and started networking and getting my resume out and basically just explaining to these people like, hey, I'm working this job and I'm not exactly happy. I don't really know what I want to do, but I'm willing to. I didn't have a girlfriend or anything. I was like, I'm willing to move wherever and do whatever if it's something different than this. And I got a job offer from a company in Las Vegas in the events industry, which I had no exposure to, never heard of, actually planning and managing large corporate events. And so I accepted the job, threw my stuff in my car and drove to Las Vegas, and, had no idea what I was getting into. Like, had no idea what the job even was, and just was like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, let's go.
And it's easy back then, right? Because you could just stick all your stuff in your car because you don't have a lot of stuff. Now it's a whole thing.
Well, also, I think I was just turning 23, and it was Las Vegas. And I was like, perfect.
This is Jacksonville to Las Vegas, no brainer.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, let's go. That was the first time that I had ever just completely changed my life on my own decision making, if that makes sense. It was kind of the first opportunity for me to kind of like raise my hand and just go. And that was amazing. And went out there and everything went well, and kind of was working for a large company, was working for a very structured program, a very time oriented ladder on how you get to the next level. They reward time at the company. Um, it was probably 5 or 6 years in where I started to realize that I was just in a better box. I started to really like understand, like, okay, or I even just started to think about, what if I stayed here for 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the absolute best case outcome of me? And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to do that. I don't, even if it was like a trajectory through the company that was meteoric, would I be happy in that position 20 years from now? I was like, no. The answer was no. In my mind, I knew that. I was like, okay, well, in the industry, if I left and went to another company or started a company, would I be happy in this industry? And it was like, again, no. And it was kind of just this game of looking forward and looking at all the possibilities. And that kind of led me to the biggest risk I ever took, which was switching into financial advising.
Okay. So I want to just pause and just ask you a couple of questions about some things that you said. First, you mentioned that you asked yourself a lot of questions. I love that because I really think it's necessary for us to ask ourselves certain questions in life repeatedly and at different stages to just make sure that things are really what we want. Are we happy? Are we just doing things just for the sake of doing things? And I think it's great that you recognize you were just in a better box because, again, it sounds like just like it was at Winn-Dixie, you were just kind of putting in your time again and just looking for the next rung of the ladder. I always thought that was interesting how companies or big corporations reward people based on time. I
Yep.
don't think that time is a great measure of anything. I don't think time is the measure of success in a marriage. I don't think it's the measure of success in a company. Why wouldn't it be based on the quality of the of what you bring to that organization versus just time? Like it's just the craziest thing. I feel the same way about hourly jobs.
Yep.
Why are we not paid according to what we bring to the table as opposed to hourly? And it's
Yep.
just that whole matrix of trading time for money, which is something I absolutely can't stand, but it's how
And I
America
think
works.
that to add to that, I think that not only is it a poor way to view an employee, unfortunately, when you're the employee in that situation, it's so hard to be passionate and to actually outperform when you're in a structure like that. And so one of the things that I had to get real about was I was doing well, but doing well based on standards around me
Hmm.
and not necessarily feeling like I was doing well according to what I felt my capabilities were.
Hmm.
And so I was doing well because my boss was saying good job, or I was outperforming maybe a person to my right or a person to my left. Um, but I realized I wasn't like leaning into the job. I wasn't fulfilled or excited or doing the extra work. And sometimes I know people who are in a corporation and they are leaning in and they do well and they move up very quick. And so it's not to say that being in a box or anything like that is bad. Like I don't want that to be what I'm saying. But for me
It may
personally,
be bad for you, though. That's
for
the thing.
me
I don't know if
personally,
it's bad for everybody, but it's bad for some people, and it would also be bad for me.
yep.
So, what would have made you lean in into that job? Is there something that could have been different that would have changed the way you viewed it? Had you lean in and be more um, intrigued?
That's a great question. I've actually never thought about it. I don't think so. I just don't think it was for me. I don't think my personality, my motivations, because that's what it really comes down to too. Is it's not only motivation and perseverance and those types of moving forward and leaning in qualities.
Hmm.
It's hard to have that 24/7. Um, if you're not in love or if that bliss isn't meeting the destination, it's very hard to do. For me, again, I know some people that are just like they're actually built for that, like the way.
They
So
are. I do actually believe that people are built differently. One of the things is because I know so many people who are very miserable in their job or they're overworked and they have no life and their job literally takes up their whole life. And yet they find some way to pacify themselves through it. And it's interesting because I can't. I
yeah,
can't do that. I am not built like that. And I will just find a way. I will claw myself out of that box
yep,
and clawing myself out of the box of medicine took a while, but I still got out. So, it
yep.
just, but I think some people are really able to do it other more than other people are. So I think, for you, I think it was inevitable. You were going to find a way out.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it would have happened earlier too if I wasn't in Las Vegas.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're like, well, you think to yourself, well, I really don't like this, but I am in Las Vegas, so there are
there,
worse places to
there,
be and
there
worse
were there
things
were
to
a lot of perks that kind of distracted me.
go.
Like,
Exactly. So now I'm curious as to you said this leads us to the biggest risk you took, which is going to be into financial advising. Now, you have a finance degree. I would have thought that doing something in the event space was a bigger risk. Why do you feel that this was your biggest risk?
Yeah. Well, so finance degree is probably a little bit um like an undergrad or medical degree or biology, or I know you guys don't
Oh,
have to
right,
say
right,
this.
right. We
It's
have
kind
to
of
do right. So it's not enough.
finance is like corporate finance, taxes, financial advising isn't exactly taught. It's like one or two courses maybe. So that's one part. The other part is when you're in your 20s, um, I wouldn't have felt comfortable talking to people about their decisions with their money just at that time. And maybe that was like silly, like maybe I could have, but in my mind at the time, I was like, I would never do that. But so my father was a coach, coach college soccer, was a high school teacher, and I had done that for the first 20 years of his life until he was maybe late 30s. And then we had a bunch of kids, me and my two sisters. My mom was a lifer at State Farm. And they were just like at this point where they're like, we want more money because between the two of them, it was okay income, but it wasn't, they needed and wanted more to give us more, which is, amazing here.
Hmm.
So he got into life insurance and annuities and a very subsector of the financial industry.
Hmm.
And he had been doing that for 20 years. And so it was always there. He had his own company. It was very small. It was on his own, kind of producing and doing his own thing. And the idea, the two big issues were one, I was making very good money in Vegas um, for my age and for the job, and I had exposure to a lot of amazing things. We had box seats at the stadium I could use whenever I wanted. I knew everybody in the hotels. I knew all the nightlife people. I
I
had my
want to go work for that company.
company card taken. As part of my job was taking clients out. It was
Not a bad gig.
it was a very cool place to be. But eventually, like those cool things, after 4, 5, 6 years, become less cool.
It's
Everything turns into a job when you're doing it all the time.
yes.
Um, but the idea of selling life insurance, I didn't like that idea. The idea of taking a massive pay cut, I didn't like that idea. Um, 30 is probably, or late 20s. It's leaving something you've been doing for 6, 7 years is also another risk.
Hmm.
And working with family, working with my dad, there was a lot. There was just a lot there where uh, it was a big pill to swallow. It was a big pill to swallow.
And so, I mean, working with a parent is not easy. Working with any family member is not easy. I've done things like that, and I have not thought they were easy. I don't know. So there's a lot of dynamics with the parent child working together because again, that parent thinks they're the parent. Well, they are the parent. They're not
Yep,
thinking that, but there's a hierarchy of.
there is.
So
There is.
if you don't agree with him, that's a whole thing.
Yep. And it wasn't even, so the idea too was as the agreement was, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna work for you and I'm gonna make zero money to start. Like I mean,
Yeah.
I don't even want to tell you how much money I made the first year.
Whew.
And I'm gonna give up all this money and just start from scratch. But I'm doing this because I have an idea of where I want this to be in the future. And so I'm going to come in and we're going to turn this into something different than it is right now.
And is that how you approached your dad with this idea? Is that how that went down?
Yeah, so it was a lot of the discussion was, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm not just going to do what you're doing, but we're going to turn this into from a a priority life insurance shop to a complete holistic wealth management shop.
Wow. So for the people out there listening, and what does that mean?
So everything from investments, retirement accounts, estate planning, tax strategy, life insurance, becoming very much more of like a family office setup
Hmm.
where we quarterback, you know, we're your first stop for any big financial decisions. If you're selling a business, if you have a big liquidity event, if you are looking to retire, you need to create retirement income. Um, just going into this very, very broad but very boutique feel,
Hmm.
um, which was just a very different path or feel than what it was previously.
Right. And so if you're going to compare what you guys do to other companies out there, like the big companies, you typically don't get that one-on-one experience. They're just managing a portfolio, I feel like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I've had experience with some of these kind of companies. So, they're just managing your portfolio. There's no I don't, I mean, they'll tell you you can ask questions, but when you ask the questions, what I've experienced in the past is that the answers don't make any sense to me because they're provided to me in a way that, like, I could do that in medicine where I can make it that you don't understand a word I'm saying, or I could dumb it down, which I always do for people so they understand what I'm saying, and make it so that it's in layman's terms.
Yep.
One thing that I found is most companies are on that protocol where they almost make it difficult for you to understand because I don't know if that's the goal, but it feels like it might be. And I don't feel like most companies are there for everything. They're just there for a section of some
Yep.
things.
Yeah, it really goes back to that corporate box. When you think about a fiduciary, somebody who's doing something in your best interest, and then you look at it and you look at these big companies, so Merrill, Schwab, like all the Edward Jones, whatever it is. Um, there's generally a lot of top-down structure on this is the strategy, this is the product, this is the type of client, and this is the 1, 2, 3 sales script on where they go. Um, and it's generally, and most times, it's not necessarily fiduciary when it's top down, when they're the services they provide. Um,
Okay.
so it's very different. Is we're independent in the sense that nobody tells us, hey, this is your sales quota, this is the type of things you have to sell, and this is, you're constrained to these types of products and strategies.
Mm.
Um,
So now you guys will find things that you believe in and bring them to the clients as possibilities of things they can invest in or whatnot, right? And because nobody tells you what you have to do, you probably have a greater spread of things to choose from, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
yeah, absolutely. One of the ways to think about it too is if you're a really big company, an investment or an opportunity needs to meet certain criteria with size to be approached. Because if you're a big company, you have thousands and thousands of advisors and you have hundreds of billions of dollars that you need to get placed. It needs to go somewhere. People are giving you money, you have to put it somewhere. Um, and so what they don't look at is smaller deals, middle market deals, things that have less waste in them, in my opinion. And
Mhm.
that's where we find our sweet spots, things that can give you outsized returns, things that these big institutions won't look at simply because they're not big enough for to be worth their time. Um, and the other thing is, you kind of nailed it on the head. Like they're very focused on how does a big company make money? They make money by managing your retirement account and managing this account. Um, and a lot of times they're going to find the best path to get that money and do that thing
Mm-hmm.
versus being able to say, okay, what's best for Kalpana right now? Like, do we pause? Do we not do anything with that money? Do we, and kind of just really being boutique and having more things available and being more client centric and being able to communicate more. Those are all things that I'm really happy that we're able to do. It's not just a processing mill for money.
Well, I feel like the bigger companies, and I don't know if this is true, but I can just say this is what it felt like, that they had everything plugged into an algorithm that everybody was probably on the same algorithm. That's just what it felt like. And I don't know if that's how they do it.
It is. I mean,
Okay.
it's 100% true.
Yeah.
And also, you are unless you have, you know, 50, 100 million, whatever the number is, you are the smallest of fish to them.
Of course.
For the most part, they're just that big to where you have to be so big to matter to them.
Mm-hmm.
But and I always say this too, it's not bad to work with some of these big companies because at the end of the day, investment strategy is one thing, and we can help get you a little better returns. We feel like over time we can outperform those big companies, and that over time adds up to a good amount. But if you don't have good habits in place, if you're not saving, if you're not investing, even if the returns aren't the best they could be, we can't help you anyways. So it's I talk to young people all the time, and I'm like, who cares who it's with? Just start doing it. Like you have to just start doing it. That's the hardest part. Is just you have to create a budget. You got to start putting money to the side. Um,
Well, it's interesting because I talk to a lot of women, as you know, and one of my pet peeves is just that women, they often, and I was like this too, I just didn't think I understood anything about money or finances way back when. So, I had this kind of preconceived conditioning in my own mind, and I told myself that, and then it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then some years went by, and I thought, you know what? I really need to take control of my own financial future. It's not just about making money, it's about understanding where my savings are going and what's happening and how it can grow and all those things. That's when I felt really truly empowered. And I really talk to a lot of women because, I'm launching programs to help aesthetic providers, increase their profitability and all that. But, part of that is also having them understand how they need to manage their money. They need to know. And I talk to women a lot and they tell me they don't have any savings. They live paycheck to paycheck. And these are not young women. These are women in their 40s and 50s. So first of all, if you don't have a job that makes you any extra money and you're literally just covering your expenses, that is a very bad place to be, don't you think? So just so you can comment on that, because that might be the point where you might want to take a risk. Otherwise, your whole life is paycheck to paycheck.
yeah, I mean, just like a corporation, there's a top line and a bottom line. There's money coming in and there's money going out. And so most people who are living paycheck to paycheck, they have two options. They either spend less and downgrade their life dramatically in a way that, because there's always ways to spend less.
Oh yeah.
There's always ways. It's just very, very hard to do. Or you're right. Or, there's an infinite amount of ways to make more. Um, One really doesn't require any risk, and that's changing your lifestyle. It's hard, but it doesn't necessarily require any risk taking. But going out there and figuring out and making a dramatic change, that does require risk. And risk is one of these weird things that I feel like a lot of people have the wrong definition of it in their head. They view the meaning of risk the wrong way. In investments, all risk really means is a standard deviation, or how much this thing can go up and down over a period of time, right? So if the S&P 500 may have X amount of risk, but that risk goes down the longer you go out on a timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be really risky in the first year, but
Mm-hmm.
after 5 years, it's not very risky. After 10 years, it's not very risky. After 15 years, and that risk curve continues to go down the longer we're in it.
Right.
And especially with it's the same thing with taking risks in your life from a dramatic change standpoint. It's like, yeah, that first year probably going to be pretty volatile. That
Mm-hmm.
second year, probably a little less. That third year, probably a little less. That fourth year. And so being able to look out 5 or 10 years, which a lot of people really can't do, the reason they won't take the risk is because of this issue they see in 6 months. And it's like, yeah, but if we can make it by that next 6 months, and we can make it to 18 months, if we make it to 24 months, the risk goes down. The risk goes down, and not only that, the other ways that people don't think about risk the right way is, there's opportunity cost. There's the risk of not making any changes, and that's kind of the risk you were alluding to. Is it's like, okay, I'm paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't make any changes, like, where am I going to be, and what is that risk? And that is a very hard thing for a younger person to think about,
Oh, it's the older people too.
in
I
general.
can't see it all the time.
But the longer you're doing one thing, it gets scarier and scarier to make a change, because you're so comfortable, you're so used to something.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
it's
I
interesting because I feel like the more things that you actually expose yourself to in life, and I think that was why I have an easier time doing this different things, because I've done a lot of different things and I've learned more skill sets from every single thing that I've done. And because of that, I feel fairly comfortable switching gears and doing something different. So it is interesting that if we just are doing the same thing for a very long period of time, I think in our minds, we may just say to ourselves that we're not capable of doing anything
Right.
else.
Yep. Yep. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And you met one of my close friends, Ben, who was in the military,
Mhm.
um, and had this amazing career in the military, and left. And I was out there, was listening to a guy speak, who was part of the military, commander, very high up, and he
Mhm.
was describing these guys who are guys and girls who have these careers where they're in this zone, this comfort zone of their job, but in this very chaotic lifestyle. They're in war, they have all these crazy things going on, and the idea of making a change out of the military, of doing something different than this controlled chaos that they've been in, is more stressful than being in combat. Is more stressful. So, like, the amount of stress that comes with changing your life, and in talking to Ben, you could even ask him. It's like the amount of stress of the unknown and all those things. It's not to be taken lightly how big of a challenge it is to get over that.
Mhm.
Um, but the ability to look forward, and like, if I don't, then what? If I don't make a change, if I don't, what am I giving up? And that's a deeply personal question. And for me, it was, I would never be fulfilled running events.
Mhm.
I would never feel that I had reached a level of success as high as I went in that industry.
Right.
by my definition of success. I never would have gotten there.
Right.
And I couldn't live my life or continue down that path. Like that scared me more than the idea of making some dramatic change and not having money.
Right. So I want to ask you, so, when you were talking about the stress from just doing something different, I can definitely see that. I mean, I've done some major changes in my life and they have been very stressful. But one thing I'll just add to that is I feel like it's flexing a muscle or working out. I feel the more you get uncomfortable, the less stressful it becomes. And I believe it's actually easier. I've gotten to the point where, things still, there's still some stress associated with change, but I will still do it because I've now have the ability to look back and see that every risk I have taken has gotten me better and better and better off in my life. And if I hadn't taken those risks, I wouldn't be where I am. And then you mentioned opportunity cost, which is huge. So when people are in these corporate jobs, they often get worked to death, I guess, for lack of a
Mhm.
better word. I don't even know what else to call it. But they are just, they're not given breaks. They're just constant, 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 go, go, go. So people always think that their biggest resources are their money. And I beg to differ. I think it's their time and their mental energy. So, what these corporations do is I feel like they suck away all your time, they suck away every bit of your mental energy, and you are left as a shell of a human being by the end of the week. There's nothing left to think about how to better your life, how to make more money, how to invest more money, how to grow your money. There's no space for that. No space for that. And that's where I think in that big blob of removing your time and your mental wherewithal and your ability to think, I think that's how people miss out on so many opportunities. That's just my take on it.
No, I agree. And that's again the one of the bad parts about the American system is that, and you're kind of brainwashed a lot of times, and if you, especially if you don't have a family that's ever stepped outside of the box, if you don't necessarily have a friend or a
Right.
confidant or whatever it is, like if you haven't seen it or been exposed to it,
So,
a
like your
lot,
dad, right? I mean, if you hadn't seen your dad do this, you may not have had this idea to make it better, but he had the guts to start something new because he wanted more money. It turned out well for him, right? So,
yep.
I'm sure he's glad he took the risk.
I'm super fortunate. Like I had a place where I could, like a platform to like jump onto and start floating. A lot of people don't have that, and I'm not empathetic to that. Um,
100%.
and
You
you know,
you can make something out of any opportunity. I mean, I was fortunate because my father came from India to this country. And when I saw him, I told him, I said, I'm so grateful that you had the guts to come here. He had only $200 or something in his pocket. He didn't have a job. He comes in the middle of winter from India. I was like, how did you even do it, Dad? But I'm just grateful that you did because that was my platform.
yeah,
Now, being in this country, I have the ability to create whatever life that I want to create for myself.
yeah,
So I do believe, I don't think I think all of us could find some little ledge to climb up on, maybe it's not a huge platform, maybe it's a step. Just
yeah,
climb up and see what it looks like from that vantage point for a little bit and then go from there, one step at a
yeah.
time.
Uh, the first thing is to realize that you can make a change, and that realization is we just talked about all the things we talked about can kind of lead you up to, hey, I need to make a change. But the second part is starting to crawl in whether it's the content you're reading, whether it's who you're paying attention to, how much sleep you're getting, going to the gym. It's all of these things help you stack wins.
Mm,
It's like make your bed in the morning. You can't change your life in a month.
mm-mm.
It's just not how it works. It takes you have to make a decision, And then you have to be willing to take on the risk, and not just the risk, but the suffering
Oh
that
yeah.
that comes along with it. And it's not like this euphoric moment of like, I
No.
quit my job, I'm free. It
No.
doesn't work like that. Um, but again, the America is very good at making you feel like, you don't have a choice.
Right.
And so, what you've kind of heard me say it, but it's investing back in yourself. It's like not every dollar needs to go into the market or into your savings account or into your retirement account. I'm a huge believer on spending money on yourself in a stoic way, or in a way that is going to help you self improve, um,
Yeah.
and become a better version of yourself.
And
And
most financial people would not give you that advice.
yeah,
I don't think. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think so. And
okay,
that is really important. I mean, you sometimes, I spend a lot of my resources in personal development and just, but I feel that that has really helped me become a better and better version of myself. Not just personal development, but skill development and all these things. Because the world full of technology, there's some things I don't really understand how to. I know I have a lot of information that I want to share with the world, but sometimes I don't know the technology and how to get it out there. So I've spent a lot of my resources trying to figure those things out. But now that I have everything ready to launch, I'm so glad that I did. So, and I remember you telling me that, and I was like, oh, good. I was feeling a little guilty about this, spending my resources on these things, but I'm really glad I did it. And I'm glad that you validated that decision for me too.
yeah. And I always encourage people. A lot of people underestimate how willing others are willing to help if you ask.
True.
When I first made the transition and was just trying to figure out like what's what, where am I trying to go, how do I start putting the building blocks together, I went out and found two guys that were maybe 12, 13 years older than me, very successful, were recommended as very good at what they do, which is what I was trying to build. And I just called them and said, hey, can I come out for like 48 hours and just hang out and talk with you guys and understand how you run your business and how you got there and all those things, and get tips from you. Um, but many people kind of suffer in silence instead of really understanding that, hey, ingenuity and going out there and making yourself available and starting to ask the questions, you'd be surprised how many people
Hmm.
want to help you, especially if you're doing the little things already, especially if you're taking the time to take care of yourself and get better and read about things,
Hmm.
and people can tell you're doing the work. You know, there's a path.
Yeah, no, it's really true. And I think we forget often to ask for help, and just mention that we're going through things or even show some vulnerability like, hey, I'm wanting to change my job and I don't really know what to do. And, people know other people that have gone through similar experiences and then they start talking and you may just get an idea from something like that. So I think that's a great point because we often forget that. So we're running out of time, unfortunately. I feel like this was such an intriguing conversation because I love talking. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about because I love risk, strategic risk. I feel that, so many people are averse to it. And the important thing I feel that we're trying to express to people out there that there is a way to take a strategic risk and come out ahead. So I want to leave you with the floor for the last few minutes just to talk about anything that you feel would be relevant in what we were talking about. I mean, well, maybe even I want you to summarize with what your version of success is because we didn't really get into that. So I want to hear that from you, what your specific version is, because it doesn't have to be the same for everybody.
Yeah. It's funny. I really had to sit down recently and think about that the last couple of years. And one, it was personally becoming financially free, just to where money was not an issue. But I realized that what would really make me feel successful is to be able to provide opportunities to others to do that. And not just by having clients and helping them, but by being able to build a team of like-minded individuals that care about each other and that can change from wherever they are and come into the system and be a part of the family and um, have success. Um, so
I
right
love
now, right now, it's like I feel like I'm on the path. I get how to make money and I know where I'm going. But right now, the big thing for me is like how do I grab others and how do I make it bigger and build a community around it.
I love it. I love that. And it's true because it really is so much about community and helping other people. It isn't, and that's the beautiful thing about when you're financially set to a certain point, you can actually focus your efforts on helping other people. If you're just worried about survival mode, which is like the lowest, denominator that you could be at, you can't flourish in any other way. So those things are really, really important. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I was excited to have you on the show today, and I'm so glad that we got to talk about all these fun things that I love talking about, and I hope the audience enjoyed it too. So I will, look forward to having you back maybe in another couple at some point, maybe next year, and see where you're at.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's
Yes, thank you.
always great chatting.
Yeah, great chatting with you, and I'm so glad you were able to join us on Gloves Off. Have a fabulous rest of the evening.
Thanks.
Bye. All right. Well, I hope you guys really enjoyed that episode. I love talking about risk because so many of us are so averse to it, as we were discussing, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I think our society makes it feel like it is because it's a little bit scary. So, one of the things that I love about Joe is that, it's he's gone through some different things in his life, and it's not easy working with your parent. It's not easy coming to your father and telling him you want to change the company that he created. But yet he was bold enough to do that. And look, it's a benefit to his father's company, it's a benefit to him and to the clients that they serve, which is amazing. So anyway, if you're looking to get in touch with him, you can see the website below. And next week, I'm so excited because I'm going to have Jessica Klingspor on. She is a lovely woman that I met while I was speaking. We were both speaking at a conference in Barcelona last year, actually. God, it's been a whole year. It was in October of last year. And so she is very, very interesting because she's Swedish. And what she wants to do is she wants to actually like combine Nordic innovation with the Barcelona ecosystem. It sounds really complicated, but we're going to dive into that conversation with her next week. And she's also a conscious entrepreneur, another concept that I really, really love talking about. So we're going to dive into that conversation next week. I hope all of you have a fabulous rest of the evening. And as always, I'm thrilled that you were able to join us for another episode of Gloves Off. And I will see you guys next week.